Hey guys, Stealth here and welcome to this video on Sea Power. Sea Power is a game that's currently in development and I am very much looking forward to this new naval game. First up, a big shout out to Dry Dock Games who helped me get the footage, or at least some of the footage for the video that you're about to see. Some of the footage you might already know, because it is footage that they posted on their own channel a while ago. Some of it you might not have seen yet. Now, what's this game about? It is Cold War era, as you might already be recognizing from some of these ships. So you're playing in the 1960s to 1980s, and unfortunately for all of us, hostilities in Europe have broken out. Now, in this game you'll be able to control both Warsaw and NATO forces. You'll be able to control their shipping, particularly. You're not going to be doing much land warfare, but there will be land facilities and real-world terrain. So you might not be able to directly influence an army or say a group of tanks, but you will be able to use an airbase to launch aircraft. The game is going to try and be as realistic as possible. You're going to have ship physics, as you can already see. The ships are interacting with the waves. You're going to have flight mechanics or flight physics, so that helicopters and planes and missiles, particularly missiles, are going to be behaving in a realistic way as possible. It's going to be real-time combat. That means that you're going to be looking at the combat as it happens, but seeing as you, of course, have a single-player mode, you'll be able to speed it up, slow it down, and everything in between. Because sometimes you might have engagements that last hours and hours on end, so having an ability to control time would be very useful. Now, as for the theaters of war, we got the North Atlantic. Of course, the battle for the North Atlantic is going to be a big one. You're also going to see the Persian Gulf, the Gulf of Tonkin, and the Mediterranean area. And the game will eventually have a dynamic campaign. Theater scale. So you're going to be, for example, operating in the Atlantic. You might have a couple of encounters which will drastically change the way that the next encounter is going to happen. So all of these things are definitely going to make for a very interesting way to play the game. If you are not that interested in the campaign, then you can also play with a scenario editor or a quick mission builder and build something to your heart's content. And if they're going to be able to patch this into the Steam Workshop, you will also be able to download your scenarios from there or share scenarios that you have made with other people. As you can see, the aircraft are definitely going to be a part of the game. Beware the skies, because the bombers might be on their way. Or perhaps the fighters might be on their way to knock down your helicopters. As for the amount of ships, they're currently listing about 50 original ships and around 30 original aircraft. So you'll have your pick of the litter when it comes to the abilities to control all sorts of ships, aircraft, and ideally keep everything as alive as possible. Now let's have a look at a couple of clips about this game. This clip is one that you might already have seen on their channel. It is a couple of Russian ships facing off against a couple of NATO ships. Now, a couple of things that you can already see on the screen, bottom left hand side, are the stats of the ship. Speed 19 knots, course 254, there's 9,240 feet below the keel, and the ship currently doesn't have any specific order, so she's just moving forward. When it comes to her weapons, she has a couple of SA-N3s. SA is surface-to-air missile, SS is a ship-to-ship missile. And all of these has different, or have different designations, of course. You got 96 RBU-56 for some of these ships. These have 60 RBU-1000s, that is anti-submarine warfare. You got some noisemakers, you got SET-65s, you got chaff, so when it comes to your different weapon systems or your different ships, they're going to have different weapons, of course. Noteworthy is that you have a little thing called MCON on the bottom right-hand side. Emission control. You also see this visually as none of these ships are using radars. Everybody is trying to maintain a level of stealth. And in order to actually be able to see something, they're going to launch this helicopter. You saw the helicopter actually came out of the hangar, so that is one of the things that is modeled in this game. And it just looks so good. I don't believe that currently we have any game like this out there. Cold Waters comes to mind, and that's not surprising because this is being worked on by some of the devs from Cold Waters. outside of cold waters, and I mean cold waters is submarine warfare. Outside of cold waters, I'm thinking maybe command modern naval warfare does something like this. And alternatively, I'm going all the way back to a game called Dangerous Waters. Dangerous Waters in Subcommand. Now over here you can see the helicopter taking off. It's a KA-25. And this guy is going to be the eyes and ears of this group. This one is going to be the Surface Search Radar Unit. So this way the ships can maintain their stealth, but immediately you see a couple of radar tracks coming up. And the game is taking a while to figure out where they are. And there we go. You see 7009 moving up, but now it's at the same spot as the other one. So there seems to be another group coming their way. At this point, he is moving, he being the guy actually playing this particular bit of footage, moving up some of these ships to make sure that they all stay fairly close together and that they'll be able to share their potentially anti-missile defense, as that might be required at some point. You can also see a towed array streaming behind this ship, so this guy is also capable of dealing with submarines. Now some of these ships you might know the designation of, you might know the type. If not, it is not something I'm going to go into too deeply in this particular video. But I used to have, way back in the day when I was growing up, a subscription to a thing called Modern Weapons, I think it was. And every week you used to get one of these papers, one of these mini magazines for a binder. So I ended up with massive binders full of information on everything from planes to the harpoon anti-ship missile to ships to infantry weapons. So some of these things I kind of grew up reading about, and beyond Dangerous Waters, I don't think I've been able to control these ships in a conflict. Well, there used to be, what was that, Northern Waters Arctic Conflict, I think, and WAC, but that too is very, very old. So, again, I don't think there's anything like this currently out there. And I'm so eager to play this. I think you can have so much fun with this game. So many interesting situations. Now, something else you can see on the screen, bottom right-hand side next to MCON is weapons tight. So the ships are allowed to return fire, but they're not allowed to open fire. Some of these ships are now in a better position, so we're going back to a head standard. And this way the group is a bit more condensed. Now at some point, something goes a little wrong. Let's fast forward to that bit. At this point, the ships have activated their radars, and with good reason. I'm not sure exactly why they figured out that they need to do that, but the enemy group is potentially getting a bit close. And look at the minimap. We have a bit of a problem with incoming missiles. Those surface contacts, 710, 707, 705, or 7005, they have launched a whole bunch of missiles, so the Russian ships are currently in a lot of trouble. And as you can see, initially they're designated as flying contacts, but soon they're detected as incoming missiles, or rather identified. So the Russian ships are firing everything and anything that they have to try and defeat these incoming missiles. At this point, it's up to the ships themselves, it seems. The player doesn't strictly need to do a whole lot. It seems like the ships figure out what missile to target and figure out how each target should be engaged. I think this is excellent because it means that as a player you have a bit more time to start managing what is left to manage in this part of the game. Maybe you can click on each ship and tell them to target one specific track if you so desire, but just having all these ships go after targets of their own choosing might be best. This is very, very much work in progress, as you can see everywhere on the screen, well, in this clip top right. Everything might change, everything is being worked on, so what you see here is definitely not the final version of the game. Over here we got the Strozhevoy, and it looks like the Russians are making progress dealing with some of these incoming NATO missiles, but there is still more. So they're also adding chaff and flare to try and make themselves as difficult to hit as possible. Eventually the missiles will get into close range. CWIS range, close in weapon system. And that is glorious. At least it's glorious to hear. You gotta love the sound of that. There we go. More missiles are getting neutralized. Of course, all of this counter-missile action is taking quite a bit of a toll on the missile defenses that these Russian ships have left. And I imagine that when it comes to the dynamic campaign, this is something that could be really important. If your ship, if your ship has been under missile fire before, and it was allowed to shoot back with most of its counter-missiles, then you might not have a whole lot left. So if you then get attacked again by another volley of missiles, you might run into the problem that you don't have anything to return fire with. That's something that I could imagine for the dynamic campaign. That from mission to mission, or from level to level, however you want to designate it, it tracks how many things have been fired from a ship. How many weapon systems have been used, and how much ordnance do you have left. Now it seems that the worst is over. Let's have the Russians get some revenge. So, time for the Russians to throw some missiles back at NATO. These Russian ships carry some substantial firepower, as the Russian anti-ship missiles tended to be bigger than those of NATO. If you look at the ship missiles that you're going to be seeing, the SSN-3, these are Shadok missiles, which carry a 1,000 kilogram payload. Compare that to a Harpoon that carries 221 kilograms, or a Tomahawk anti-ship missile that carries 450 kilograms. These things hit like a truck. So this guy is opening up, and if you get hit by one of these, it's going to hurt you a lot more than getting hit by a Harpoon. So the Russians are opening up, and this cruiser, well, you can see it only has 8 of those large missile tubes. So it doesn't, well, maybe their doctrine was, let's just hit him really hard once and knock him out like that, instead of trying to overwhelm the missile defenses. These Shadoks, you really don't want to get hit by that. You can see that he's also going to be trying to engage with some other ships. And interestingly, these missiles are not sea skimming. They're not flying really low. Now, I'm not familiar with the Shadok, the SSN-3. So, potentially this was just the way that it operated. Potentially the low flying thing is not something that the Russian missiles did at all. I am no naval expert when it comes to these cold water systems. Or sorry, Cold War systems. Anyway, we have a bunch of missiles out, and now it is time to engage, or ceasefire. The ship is now on ceasefire, so it's no longer going to be engaging. We have 5 missiles seemingly going for one target. The real question is, can the NATO group deal enough damage, or can they make life on this missile system difficult enough to shut it down? Can they take down all the missiles? Now here, by the way, you can see that the game is being sped up a little bit. So you can see how quickly and how slowly you want to make the game, depending on things are, well, whether things are happening or not. In this situation, this, what I believe to be a frigate is going to have, no, sorry, cruiser, is going to have a really, really bad time. They are going to try and shoot back with the NATO standard missiles, but that's potentially not enough. This one did get taken down, but there are 4 more. Now, in this situation, I'm a bit surprised that the other ships aren't helping out. There's the Sea Whiz from the NATO ship. I'm a bit surprised the other ships aren't helping out with their missiles. Maybe they're too far apart. I don't know. At any rate, this Sea Whiz is dealing a pretty good amount of damage to the missiles. There's still standard missiles going out, but this guy got hit. And, ooh, and again. And look at how quickly it rolls over. They switch over to a different ship, and potentially for the purposes of this demo footage, if you will, they didn't allow the other ships to fire at all. Just to show what happens if you get hit. Ooh. So this was the one ship. This is the other ship that got hit by two, and it already rolls over. And it's just done for. Two of those 1,000 kilogram missiles, and you're going to have a really bad time. And it looks like this ship might go under as well. So, let's move on to a different clip and show you what it looks like when a ship gets hit. Because they have, of course, a tool that they can use to simulate this with. Here we are. I've frozen the footage so we can have a bit of a look on what is happening, let's say, behind the scenes. What is the game simulating? What you can see is that the ship has a couple of different weapon systems. The SPG-60, the gun front, SPG-60, sonar system, a Mark 45 gun front, and a Mark 15 Sea-Wiz. You can also see they have a fire roll. So next fire roll in 13 seconds, I suspect means they're going to be checking if the ship is on fire or whether it will catch fire from an impact in 13 seconds. And this way the game keeps repeating this check. It seems to do the same thing with a sink roll. So every now and then it checks, hey, am I sunk or am I not sunk? Am I sinking? Am I flooding? What is the status of the ship? And it seems to do this in a whole bunch of different compartments. You can see the ship is divided into all these sections. And they'll say, no damage, no flooding, we're fine. But what happens if you actually start to inflict some damage? Now, what's happening right now is the ship is supposedly getting hit by USN Cal 127. So 127mm round, aka a 5-incher. It doesn't do that much damage. But what happens when you get hit by a harpoon? Well, suddenly the ship isn't too happy anymore. You can also see the superstructure gets destroyed. So, destructible superstructure there. And now we got severe damage on both compartments, both sides of the ship. And note how the port side goes down first, because it seems to be 140% flooded. And say goodbye to your ship. Anti-submarine warfare is also part of the game. And in this case, this ship, the Admiral Izakov, is engaging a submarine with the RBU-600 system. These are basically rocket-assisted anti-submarine bombs, depth charges, and you can see that track 7001 is going to be the subject of this attack. Now, it might look fairly innocuous. He just got a couple of splashes, and, well, is that it? Not really, because you can see the splashes above the submarine, and soon this submarine, which appears to be running at about 25 knots at a depth of 200 feet, is going to get totaled by a couple of these RBU charges. So that's a way to get rid of submarines. NATO does it slightly different. They have the ASROC system. This is also known as the RUR-5, and what it does is it launches a missile, and the payload of that missile is a Mark 46 torpedo. So you can launch a torpedo by rocket or at a target that might have been detected by a helicopter. There you go. The missile has dropped off the torpedo. Nice little chute comes out so the torpedo doesn't slam into the water and explode upon contact. And once it enters the water, it starts using its own sonar. It starts finding the submarine, starts tracking the submarine, and unless the submarine does something to avoid this torpedo, other than running away at 40 knots, it is going to get hit. So NATO also has their fair share of weapons against submarines. This clip I also really enjoyed watching. This is an Oliver Hazard Perry class frigate, and just note how it launches a missile. The OHP, or Oliver Hazard Perry's, had a missile launcher on the bow. You can see it there. It launches a missile and another one gets popped up from the magazine underneath it. Nowadays, ships have VLS, or vertical launch systems, and these are basically cells of missiles. You got these, let's say, 4x6 rows of hatches in the bow on the stern, potentially, depending on the type of ship, of course, and they just launch a missile from whatever hatch they need. It's a bit, bit blunt, but that's basically what they do. The OHP doesn't do that, and they accurately modeled how this missile launcher first loads a missile and then is able to launch said missile. So first you see the missile launcher from vertical at the start of the clip, and then they turn the missile launcher at the target and launch the missile. Problematic with this is that you cannot be launching so many missiles at the same time. The Russians have all of these fixed tubes, And if they want to launch multiple missiles in a short time period, they just do it. The NATO, or at least this ship, is not going to be able to have that capacity because it doesn't launch that quickly. Now you can see on the mini-map that we have 2 missiles going out from the Oliver Hazard Perry. This ship is going to, at some point, have to take action if it wants to survive. First up, you're going to have to detect them, and this ship just has. And there we go, we got the first missile out already. Second missile. So it has fired 1 missile, counter missile per target, but the first one missed. Time for the second one, and the second one might have been launched at a different track. So at the second missile that came in. Now the harpoons are, as opposed to the missiles that you saw before, the Shadocks, these are sea skimming, so they fly really, really low to make themselves a very difficult target to both detect and engage. Up until the point where they strike their target. Now, interestingly, the Russian ship doesn't take any further action against this missile. But they still have some tricks up their sleeve. They still got the Sea-Whiz, the close-in weapon system. And note how this harpoon climbs up and then comes down right onto the target. And are we going to do enough damage to sink this ship? Well, as I said before, this one carries a payload that's about 221 kilograms. But hitting amidships like that might knock out some critical electronics. Might knock out their radar. Another missile from the Oliver Hazard Perry, because the target hasn't yet been completely eliminated. So the OHP continues its attack, and again, because I suspect this is just a footage bit, sort of demo footage, to show you what the game looks like, what the game can do, the Russian either isn't aware of the OHP, or just has been programmed not to return fire, beyond, of course, defending itself. A little later, the Russian launches another missile, and this one does work as intended. And I, for one, admire the engineering that allows you to hit something moving at 500 knots with something else that moves at 2300 knots accurately. It's, for me, a remarkable feat of engineering. On to the last clip. This is a Slava-class cruiser. It's carrying P-500 Basalt supersonic cruise missiles, again a payload of 1000 kilograms, and this is, let's say, more of a technical test, and in that window on the top left you can see what the game is doing, let's say behind the scenes again. You can see the Slava is launching a lot of missiles. It seems to be punching out its entire payload of these P-500s, and it's going to be up to NATO to try and put some defense against it. What I really found interesting when I was looking at this clip is how all of these missiles seem to try and join a formation almost. Because at some point they're almost flying side by side, even though they've been launched slightly after each other. So it's like they have this, look at that other cruise missile catch up, if you will. It's like they have this system, much like some artillery systems do, where the missiles all try to hit the target at the same time. Now, as this is happening, of course, NATO isn't going to sit back and just let this happen. So what you're going to find is that NATO will use jamming at long range. And this jamming is going to be shown in that window. So you're going to be seeing an indicator that's working almost as a dice roll, going, okay, we got an incoming missile. This is going to be a bit of a problem. Let's try and jam it. Let's throw a dice, and it's going to try and compete with the mechanics of the missile, let's say the counter jamming system, if you will, to try and break through that. Now look at all those missiles. Normally you wouldn't have these trails, but this is just for the testing, just for the behind the scenes look on how the mechanics of the game work. Look at this salvo though. And again, this is a 1000 kilogram warhead per missile. Just look at how they beautifully line up, especially according to that minimap indicator. Boom. SSN-12 was intercepted by a Standard Missile 1, by the USS England, which is CG-22. Couple of missiles, there we go. Standard Missile 1 was jammed by the onboard jammer of the missile, right? So this missile carries a jammer to throw off missiles that are countering the missile. The missile knows where it is because it knows where it isn't, and it doesn't want anybody else to know where it is or where it isn't, so it's using a jammer. And the Mississippi is also using a jammer because the SSN-12 was jammed by the Mississippi. So there is a lot of electronic warfare happening in this game. And again, all of these circles and bubbles that you normally probably wouldn't see, you just see the missile. You also see a couple of dice rolls. Chaff. Dice roll was 37. Seemingly successful, and with that the missile was intercepted, spoofed, or resisted. So all of these things are happening behind the scenes, and you're basically looking at a real-time track of what is happening with any particular missile at any given time. In this case, you see SSN-12 rejects the chaff. So the dice roll for the missile was better than the dice roll for the chaff, and the missile was as such not distracted by the chaff, so the missile is still on track to the target. Now some of these NATO ships are going to have a really rough time with these missiles. Again, you're getting hit by 1,000 kilograms, and some of these ships are not going to survive. That one seemingly got hit by 3 missiles at once, and is basically dead on sight. It's just... that cruiser is immediately sinking. The stern's already flooded, and seemingly it's no longer going to be a threat. This one, I'm not sure what that big bubble on the stern is. Maybe it's jamming, maybe it's something else. There you go. That's one dead ship. Here's another Perry, I think. Yeah, those sonar pings I found a bit weird, but again, it is work in progress, so they're probably still going to be changing that. Perhaps a sinking ship can still send out sonar pings. I'm not sure. I think this is something that they will be fixing on later. Now, again, I really want to play this. This game looks so good, and I can't wait for it to come into a demo version, but they're not going to be doing that. So we're just going to have to wait until, ideally later this year, we're going to be getting the full game to play. If you have any questions, then please post them down below, and I might be able to do a sort of Q&A video with the devs. If you have anything that you would like to see about the game, please post that too, and I might be able to get some more footage, have them show off some features, and get some more content for you guys. Now the game is listed down in the description, or linked down below in the description, so you can highlight it there on your Steam wishlist and keep an eye on it. I really like where this is going. I really want to play this, especially because I believe right now there isn't anything like it. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. Let me know what your thoughts are down below. And again, a big shout out to Dry Dog Games of Task Force Admiral for helping me get this footage. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you soon for more.